right there. Bada bing. Nailed it. Okay, so we're rolling.
Well, the proper term for the dialect of what people sort of stigmatize as Cholo slang or gangster slang. The proper term is Chicano caló, and it is a dialect. Um, a lot of the sort of words that we're used to, I think these days are like yovo, firme, things like that. But there's a lot of older even words like de aquellas, you know, what's the other one? Que nuevas, instead of saying like how's it going or what's the news, what's happening, you say que nuevas. There's a lot of old terms we don't say anymore, but that in itself was developed, during the Pachuco time, 20s to the 40s, sometime during that time, right? And yeah, it's definitely our own dialect, and a lot of Chicanos, a lot of raza, we've been keeping it up ever since. You know what I'm saying? Um, how it got started, I don't think anybody really knows. You could say that in some way, shape, or form, it might have been our Chicano style of what the Zoot Suiters were doing, because they used to, I think they called it jive or jiving, where they would have slang and some words would rhyme with another and stuff like that. So maybe we got influenced or inspired by that, and we said, well, that's cool and everything, but this is how we're going to get down, and we may have created our own sort of, dialect or speech or slang. There's a lot of things going on, and I think the young Chicanos now having to go through the Zoot riots, having to go through all the propaganda of how Chicanos were somehow very bad, evil mobsters, communist spies, all this madness that was going around in the news during that time. Um, they were still keeping the stilo alive, but it was reflecting of the time and era, and reflecting their social conditions. So they were still wearing their pants like they did with the zoot suits, except they were replaced more so by clothing that reflected their social conditions. So I would say three different things. One is the military, two is labor, and then three is the pinta. And if you look at all those clothing, whether it's like labor clothes, mechanic clothes, it's often like either the rigid jeans, or it's the Dickies. If you go to YA, they had Dickies there. You go to military, they don't have Dickies per se, but it pretty much looks like a pair of Dickies. They're wearing military belts. You wore military belts if you went to YA. You know what I'm saying? And so, with all that said, the Chicanos, the next generation, which we now understand to be called like low riding or Cholo culture and stuff like that, of audio culture, it was just, I think it was kind of made to be the example that we know now, based off of the next generation that were just keeping alive the Pachucos, but with the time and era of that time. I think that what was different, and what makes that sort of like, because folks don't really like wear zoot suits anymore unless it's like for a special party or a car show or something like that. But people do dress like cholos every single day. They crease up every single day or what have you. But even early on, like all anybody that I knew that was like in their 50s, there was no distinction between cholo and chuco. For them, it was the same thing. He said, "Oh, he's chucoed out right now," and you see him, oh, he's just wearing a pair of Dickies and a white tee, you know. But to them, it's all the same, So the only difference that changed is just our social. And the time and era. So I think that before, I'm just gonna use Lowrider magazine as an example. Before Lowrider, um, you know, uh, the cultura was simply a cultura. It was a barrio culture, right? Whether it would be low riding or whether it be the Cholo style or whatever. It was strictly barrio, right? I think what made it different is in San Juan, there was a lot of individuals that, basically became innovators. They took something that was there and they innovated and they looked at it with a different perspective. And so Sonny Madrid had started Lowrider Magazine. He's originally from San Juan, but I think it's also important to know that he was also an activist. So he was heavily involved with the Chicano movement in San Juan, and he even went as far as organizing with the Black Panthers during his career. He later created Lowrider Magazine sometime in the mid 70s. And that just created a big old explosion because this is the first time you could open a book, a magazine, you could see our people as we are in our neighborhoods and communities, And a lot of people started gravitating towards this area. Not only that, King and Story was jumping. It's documented to be the lowrider capital for about 5 years during the early to late 70s and early 80s, right there on King and Story on the east side. So there was a lot to document, a lot to talk about. But what also made what Sonny made unique is that he wasn't just focused on local. He was documenting everything and anything low riding. So in LA, in other states, wherever there was low riding, he wanted to document and be there and cover it. And it started an explosion. It gave basically David Gonzalez one of his first shots. He started out doing, originally was titled Homeboys. It was a Homeboys comic strip and later became Homies, but he first started there in Lowrider Magazine. Teen Angels, he started doing the Lowrider Arte, and then later he not broke off necessarily because they were still family. I think they're compadres. And he did Teen Angel magazine. Well, that's the 80s and 90s are definitely my era. Uh, um, I grew up in Eastside San Jose, so I grew up in these government housing projects called Pensacola apartments or Pensacola projects. It was pretty tough. I think that's the oldest projects in San Juan, one of the only two. So it was pretty tough. My memories as a kid was just ghetto birds, just hovering over the apartments almost every day, almost every night. It was definitely tough. But a lot of it, I think that was from my research and the way I look it back in my experience as well, just growing up. There was 88 was a pretty interesting year. You have NWA that just came out, with Fuck the Police and Straight Outta Compton. You had the Colors movie, and then you also had two different things that happened as well. So one of them was that prison started to become private. So meaning that they were now businesses, not just, housing for, folks that broke the law and need to serve their time. And there was also the gang enhancement law. So I think with that said, you had the actual real conditions of the hood that were affecting us. You had movies and music that made it sort of popular. Maybe it did a little too much to glorify that lifestyle and shit, And then you had these laws in place that we're ready to get you once you do this dirt. You want to be a gangster? All right, I'm waiting for you, And sometimes these gang enhancements, they're longer. There's more time on the gang enhancement than the actual crime itself. Sometimes you might be looking at 2 to 5 years on a crime, but because of the gang enhancement, you have to serve that 2 or 5 plus a 15. So you're talking about people that are doing decades more than they should behind them walls. And for Chicanos, the way we do time behind them walls, I mean, if someone's doing 10 years, you're pretty much looking at life, because you're gonna more than likely catch more time surviving in there. You know what I'm saying? And so, with all that said, there was a massive amount of violence. You know, it was post crack epidemic. Crystal and Crank started coming through and taking over the barrios. You know, I think that today, you know, where PCP might have been an epidemic in the barrio during the 70s and 80s, you know, Crystal and meth had as you know, straight up destroyed our community. So, you know, with that said, you know, it led to a lot of violence, a lot of arrests, you know, a lot of people just trying to survive.